might be looking at. Also going into the next legislative session. Because of the Teams type thing, I'd ask that you just make sure your microphones are on mute so we don't get any background noise. But if you definitely want to ask a question, we're a small enough group here, feel free to go off of mute and ask a question. If you don't go off mute, it'll probably be one heck of a good question. And if I ask you to repeat it, it probably won't be as good the second time around. So make sure you get off mute when you have a question to ask. With that, I'll do a quick roll call of the board members. Tony Bernhardt.
Here, Dave. Thanks.
Yep. Matt Bjornson.
Present.
Carrie Cutting. And Paul Much is absent, I assume, as well. With that, again, I appreciate everybody's participation today. We'll move it right along. Some good things have happened with the program as far as getting more technology savvy moving forward. Dwayne has put, and his folks have put a heck of a lot of work into this. Beth has as well. We're learning and continue to learn, but hopefully we're going in a positive direction as we work together on the petroleum tank release compensation fund. It's doing some great things, and I do think this is a very worthwhile program. Always looking forward to do more, but we have to stay within the law. With that, I guess we want to take a look at the board meeting minutes from last go around.
I remember it.
Okay. And with the minutes, were they sent out to everybody, Dwayne?
Yeah.
Any comments or questions relating to the minutes?
Should be able to see them. There's the meeting minutes from June 24th. Let's see, I got to share my screen. Sorry.
With that, I'll entertain a motion for approval.
Dave, so moved. Tony Bernhardt.
Second. You got to be it, Matt, if you want to second it.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought somebody did second it. I was thinking, who was that? Yeah, I'll second it. I'm sorry.
All right. Any further discussion? So with that, all those in favor say aye.
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 That's unanimous. And so the minutes are approved. With that, with our agenda, we'll go on to item number 3. And actually items number 3, and I assume through 6 will be Dwayne providing an update. Is that correct, Dwayne?
Yep.
So it's all yours.
Okay. All right. We're going to just go through sorry, I lost my place. Sounding like one of the candidates for office at the governor's debate the other night, where the guy said he lost his train of thought.
We'll keep this apolitical.
Okay. Trying to get this over to where I can.
Maximize your screen.
Huh?
Nice. Must be best.
Well, I got to reduce the size of it. There we go. All right. So as you can see, we have the year 2021 and 2021A invoiced by October 8th. Now, you might ask, what does 2021A means? That means that they were either new registrants or there was a change to their tank situation where maybe they added or deleted tanks. So in that case, we have to go in and do an amended registration form according to the database. So what we have is we have past due as of the 8th of 19,000, registrations of 593,300. So we've invoiced a total up to 5/8/2020 of $612,300. So then this just gives you an overview of what we've received in payment. So you can see the note below on the January 20th. Can everybody see that screen? Is it coming up okay for you? Is it big enough?
Yes, it's good for me, Dwayne. I'm sure it is for everybody. Just so we don't get ahead of ourselves here, on the 19,000 that's overdue, after the meeting, could you send that out to us so we can help maybe give some answers to that, and just in case there's something that happened out in the country that you guys aren't aware of?
Sure, we can certainly do that, but there is a list that we'll have at the end of the presentation too.
Wonderful. Okay,
And those
thank
aren't
you.
overdue, those are the past dues.
Yeah,
Correct.
those aren't overdue, they're past due.
Explain that, yeah, they're the past dues that they registered a tank, but then they're paying for the previous years.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Beth. So you can see that by July 20th, we had almost 38% of our registrants paid. August 20th, that jumped up to 82%, and by September 20th, we had 93%, and then as of the 8th, we've only got 4.9% outstanding. So the next page, basically, this was as of 9/4/2020. We haven't updated it, but this was when majority of the registrants come in. So what we're tracking is how we were paid by our registrants and how they certified their tanks. So we have 1,857 facilities. At that time, we had completed registrations of 66.7%. We had 4 that were certified. We had 168 registrants at that time that were pending. Now, the difference between facilities and owners, an owner may have multiple facilities. So when we take a look at online payments, we had a total of 689 online payments. 338 were by check by mail. That was an option that they had when they pulled down and certified their tanks. Credit card, there were 250, and we had 101 that paid with an automated bank check. So you can see how those percentages break down. Then if we take a look at owners, of course, we have 845 individual owners across the state, of which 540 were complete. 4 were certified. That means they'd certified their tanks but hadn't yet paid their tank fees. And we had 98 owners that were pending. And we have pay pending means that we were waiting for a check from them. And of course, those numbers have significantly have declined, especially with we sent out a late notice in October with late fees, so that generated a good share of those past dues coming in. So this document, we have not completely finalized the fund balance report for June 30th of 2020. We have to make sure that all of those fund balances are correct because we have a report that we have to submit to the EPA. So Beth is working diligently there's a couple of discrepancies that we've had with the previous administration's numbers that before we finalize that number, we want to make sure we get those taken care of. But we're looking at a projected balance of about almost $5.5 million in the fund. So that facilitated the $100 per tank charge that we charged for the 2021 registration fee. So let's move on to the claims report. These are claims that we've received since the first of the year. They're new claims. And you can see that we've put a reserve to them. We've only had, at this point, I think the red carpet car wash, we just approved that expenditure. It was a $70,000 expenditure after his deductible and copays. So that will go out, I think, this month. And Simonson's, we did pay that out, and we had discussed that claim pretty much at length last board meeting that we had. So you can see we've got about $486,000, $434 in reserve for claims, and we've spent $150,000 of that so far. These are claim payments that were made through October 27th. So if we go to the, does anyone want me to scroll through that slower than I am? To get a general idea of what we're looking at. And I think, did everybody get, I think everybody, our board members got a copy of this, I believe. So what it amounts to over the course of, over the claims, we've had expenses of $4.8 million approximately. We still have, we had a reserve of $5.121 million. We've made payments of $4.250 million, and the amount remaining on those reserves is $870,356.11. This is just a payment report for this quarter. So we paid out $171,123.18 to today, or to the 23rd, I'm sorry, to the 23rd. And then this is our report that we completed. This is as of September 30th of 2020, so it'd be the end of the first quarter of the biennium. So we still have a total amount of claims open of 28, of which 17 are underground, 11 are above ground. Total number of claims have been 773. Amount paid on the claims as of the prior month through the course of the program has been $17 million. So we've done $17 million worth of cleanup. We have an active tank sites of $1,722 right now, of which 1,610 of them are paid. It gives you the total number of underground storage tanks and the above ground storage tanks. We have almost twice as many above ground storage tanks that we insure as opposed to underground storage tanks, for a total of 5,932. And then these are just receipts that we've received this month. And then total receipts for the fiscal year have been 571,800. And then we have about $40,525 of registration and late fees that are due. And we have some outstanding late fees prior to 2021 as well. Excuse me. And then this was the claims report that was mailed out to the board members, indicating what's remaining, what's been paid and what's remaining on the reserves. So we have $877,929 worth of reserves for those claims. And those are for 28 different claims. So that pretty much takes care of the claims and the financial reporting.
Matt, Tony, any questions? Or additional information you'd like?
Will Ruben go through some of the ones that we need to touch on, guys? Is that coming up yet or not?
Yeah, he's on the agenda next.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I guess one question I have, go ahead.
I just said that'd be good when Ruben goes through.
Okay, we'll do that. I guess one question I have is overall lessons learned on the online registration process that we initiated this year. The good, bad, and the ugly. Dwayne, what, from our perspective, how did it go?
Once people found out how to use the North Dakota State login, that was probably the largest encumbrance we had, was people not being familiar with the North Dakota State login and having several logins, so they had a lot of frustration when it came to actually getting to our portal. Once they got to the portal, it was pretty self-explanatory, and the help sheet that Gary put together was really, really good, and it was really easy to follow. And so, you know, I mean, we had 80%, almost 80% of the people touched that portal, and only about 20% didn't use the portal, you know, wanted to do it the old-fashioned way. And, you know, I would see the next year that we should have 90% compliance with the portal. And like I said, the biggest issue isn't our issue, it's the issue with the state login. And that's because people get a state login and they forget their password or they forget their username, and they've associated that username and password with an email address, and then they go to get another password, and of course that's where they hit the barrier. Yeah, because, you know, the state of North Dakota is that set up so that it protects all of your personal information, and you know they've set it up so that you can't hack into it. And once we got past that hurdle, there was the first month, it was pretty intensive. I spent most of my day on the phone helping people. But once we got them walked through it, there were really only a handful of people that had negative comments about the portal. Most everybody, once we had a couple of glitches and issues that we had to deal with. Chrome didn't work real well for a while, and we got that fixed. But for the most part, I really think that this was a huge labor saver. I mean, it was just way easier to track everything, and it went real well. We got certificates of deposit or certificate of registrations out almost immediately as soon as they were paid, because it was all automated. If they went through the automated system, as soon as they paid and we verified that their payment was made, they got their certificates of registrations emailed to them. So
I guess, you know, Tony, Matt, and I'll bring in Mike Rood on this too. Have your experiences, or what have you heard, good, bad, ugly, about the online system? Is any suggestions on how to make it better?
This is Tony Bernhard. I actually register our tanks every year like that, and it's been good. I mean, this was a good experience. Like Dwayne says, once you get in there and you know your password, it works very, very well. It's actually not only a time saver for you guys, but I think it's a time saver for us as well. So I thought it went very well.
This is Matt. I personally didn't have, you know, much problems with it. I thought it was for first year, I thought it was pretty good to use, and I guess and I think you mentioned this before, Dave, that, you know, hopefully North Dakota will get to the point where there's one login and you get to all the different agencies. I mean, as residents, citizens, or regulated parties, it does get. I can see why people get upset. I mean, I get annoyed with the Secretary of State every year because, first of all, you're sending a report I don't even think anyone looks at. But second of all, it's to be told you can only do it this way and it's not very user friendly. That's disgusting. But that wasn't the case with this. I thought it went pretty well.
Dave, this is Mike Rood. We had no complaints to my knowledge here at the office whatsoever. So I think it was for the first year, I would agree with Matt and Tony. I think it went over pretty smoothly. So thank you.
Well, thank you for your input. You know, if you have any suggestions on how to make it better, we're all ears. You know, it's trying to make it as painless and seamless as possible. And I agree that this was a good first step. Dwayne and Gary Habstrow did a really good job on that. And so we're hopeful as people get more comfortable with it, it'll be an easier process. And I will tell you that makes our end of it, going through all the accounting for the checks and all, and that just so much easier. And then I do believe that our database is that much more accurate moving forward with the number of tanks we know are out there. So thanks, everybody. Appreciate that.
Dave, just one more comment, Tony Bernard here. The reminders are very, very helpful. Without a reminder, I don't think you'd be at your 95, 94% of everybody registered. So reminders more than once are very helpful to let people know that they need to do this.
Good point. Thanks. Yeah, we did follow up with some phone calls too with some individuals, and that seemed to bear some fruit as well. Well, if there's no other comments on that, I guess we'll go to Ruben. Give us a report on the YES program.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Ruben is here. I'm going to share my screen with you guys and go through my report. Then we'll go from there if you have any question. I hope you guys are hearing me.
Yes, we are hearing you.
Okay, thank you.
Haven't seen your screen yet. We're looking.
Yep, my screen is coming.
Okay. There we go.
All right. I will start from the top. As you see, the list is shrinking from the last time because some of the sites that are closed, I took that off, and we are just going with the one that are now still active. Inner base in Washburn. That one, we are looking forward to close that and abandon the well. So it's not much to be done on that. PTRCF in Fargo. That one, we're still monitoring the air because of the daycare in the vicinity. But the results are showing off really good so far, but we will still keep that on due to that daycare. Farmers Union in Hazen, Farmers Union in Hazen. That's an above ground site. That site is pretty challenging. As of now, sometime, the contamination fluctuate with season. So we are waiting now for the result for the 2 years biennium sampling. And maybe we will go into remediation with that facility because we are wondering where that contamination coming from. Either there's a leak in pipe or the tank itself. So we will look critical into that when the 2 years monitoring well doesn't improve at all. So the last report came in March, so we didn't get the other report for spring or fall yet. Those are some report we are waiting for. Wilson C-Store, that's another challenging site. Initially, City of Williston was thinking of selling that site, but the buyer backed off. So, and we are looking for we sent out the bids to the consultant, and the consultant is still holding on to those. They didn't bring the bid in yet. The first bid went out, an American engineer wanted the one that bid, but petroleum insurance didn't accept their plan because their plan was kind of shaky and wasn't satisfactory, so was denied. And then we asked for a second bid on that. Our New Century Egg in Westby, we call that west of Westby because Westby is in Montana, so it's west of Westby or east of Westby. So that site is an above ground site, and as of now, we just got the sampling in May, and American Engineering are recommending another semi-annual monitoring at that location. So we'll look into that here, and in spring we might go into that monitoring plan with them again. Cases in Fargo. Remediation seemed to work, so we will look into that because the 90% recovery or reduction has been observed at that site. So we'll look into it, whether we will ask for annual monitoring or should we just abandon it. So Belva, Farmers Union in Belva, that one we just wrote a no further action letter, and that's finalized. So next year you will not see this on the list again. Both Farmers Union in Belva. Wilton, we are monitoring that. So, Flying J and Minot. That site, we are waiting for an apple transmittity test to be done on it, because when we went in for the first remediation, all the technology that we tried didn't work on it. So we are trying to do that accessibility study in order to figure out what's going on at that location. Minimart in Minot, that one we gave it 2 years to be monitored, and I hope after 2 years will be done. Freeway 147, that's in Mandan. We ran the system until July, and then we stopped it because they are only near their $1 million on that. However, we are waiting for the last report to determine what will be the next move at that location. Safari Fuel in Williston. We request groundwater monitoring. As of October 27, we didn't receive any report yet. So still waiting on that. Cooperstown, this is the site, and this site has been on the list for a while. If you guys can remember, this is a site that whereby we used to recover the product. When we come back, there is a product again. This past summer, we removed the tank, and now we are in stage of doing a full assessment at the location, and then we'll go into remediation with that. So American Engineering Testing out of Rapid City, South Dakota won the bid, and they're going to do that work. Amoco.
Ruben, I see there was an addition that, and I think we've talked about this before.
Yeah.
But at the Cooperstown location, there was additional pollution caused from an overfill.
Pretty much that was suspicious, but when we removed the tank, the failure was due to the equipment itself. So it was an overfill, but the overfill equipment didn't work well. So it was a leak eventually. I hope that. Yep.
There's no opportunity for subrogation against whoever was filling that tank.
No, I don't think so. because there will be no proof for that based to that equipment failure. That's what we were hoping for initially. So, United, sorry, Matt, I hope I answered your question.
Yes.
Okay. United Ferry Corporation in Newtown. This site, basically, we are in cooperation with EPA because tribal sites are overseen by EPA. However, if they are registered with us in petroleum insurance, then we have a say in it. So basically what is showing here, it seems that there's contamination coming from the northern side of the property to the side of our site, of the subject site. So we are working with EPA to figure out if that's the case, and then EPA will deal with tribal and we will close this site when we figure that out. If not, but the groundwater show clearly that the contamination is coming from adjacent property. Cerro Oil in Fargo, that site, we hit a roadblock with BNSF because it's close to BNSF site. However, we need to fully delineate the site. So Brian Intertech submit BNSF land access work plan to deal with it and to do the to install the monitoring well there in case if we run into any contamination. So that's another site that will go into remediation too. Creative Energy in Belfield. That site it was a pipe leak. We did the cleanup and we sent no further action letter. However, if there's anything that they run into, we will still pursue that down the road. Legacy. This is an above ground site and it's been taken care of by spill team because it was a spill. So we're still following that up too. PTRCF in Grafton, we're going to close that site. Farmers Union in Harvey, this is a new site, and now material testing is going to do the full assessment. We are waiting for that assessment to determine where we should go from there. Red carpet, we are just waiting for that site to be closed down. So those are my report, and if you have any question or I'm missing anything, let me know. Otherwise, thank you, Dwayne and Dave, for giving me this opportunity to present this report.
Any questions for Ruben?
Ruben, on the red carpet one, the site, the registration number 1449, you had $70,000 set there for reserve, so apparently no reserve needed to be paid out then?
Yeah, as of now, unless if anything come up, and also, I don't know whether their invoices are done or not. But yeah, if their invoices are completed, then there's no need for extra reserve.
Thank you.
Which site was that again, Tony?
1449.
1449.
What's
Red
the
carpet in
name of
Jamestown.
it? Red carpet?
Yep, red carpet in Jamestown.
Yeah, we've gotten the claim for that. It's like $70,000. So that'll get paid here in the next few days. We've got
Okay.
did all the investigation, verified all of the the charges and things, and looks like they did a pretty good job.
Thank you. Any other question?
Dwayne, this is Mike Rood. Where did the red carpet land farm that site? You know?
They actually disposed of it in a disposal.
Okay,
Approved landfill.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, we had this discussion in the last meeting about land farming and things to that effect, and I called all of the sites that accept petroleum contaminated soil, and they're all right around $50 a cubic yard for disposal. And that's before transportation. And of course, it didn't cost us anything to transport that soil because it was very close to where the site was. That included the $50 included the transportation. I talked to Wannenberg about that. And I did talk to the people up at Sawyer, the Clean Harbors. I talked to the manager up there, and we did get permission from them. They would give us a break at about $49 to $50 a cubic yard if it was for the fund. That's down from $55 that they normally charge. So it's a 10% break.
This is Dave, and you know, Mike, I appreciate your question because that brings up a question I have is that with the new rulemaking that the department has gone through as it relates to land farming, one-time land farming, kind of a permit by rule. Chuck, would that, and this is to Chuck Hyatt, would that apply to underground storage tank, above ground storage tank, soil removal, and could they take advantage of that?
Yeah, this is Chuck. Absolutely. If it turned out that that was a good mechanism to use, those general permits would be available for that type of process. Yeah, we have some draft language for that general permit for land farming that hopefully we'll be able to share to the stakeholders here pretty soon. So stay tuned.
And that might be another option to taking care of contaminated soil.
One of the real problems that we run into when we go to a site or when we have a tank removal site where the people doing the tank removal haven't really taken into consideration that they might have contaminated soil. So now all of a sudden they dig this soil up and they've got, you know, they have no plan of how they're going to get rid of this. So they either have to stockpile it and find to get bids, or, you know, in cases if they don't contact us and find out what they really need to do, then of course it gets moved to a landfill. So
I think that's an educational opportunity where I think we might be able to send out a memo or work through Mike Rood's organization to get, you know, that, you know, in the cases where we've had contamination, there's a good chance we find soil contamination and they may want to do a little upfront planning to reduce the cost.
Ruben, I think in your guidelines, I think there's even a section in there that talks about the fact that when they remove tanks, that they're supposed to have some provisions if they in fact come up with petroleum contaminated soil when they remove those tanks. Correct? I saw it somewhere in one of your guidelines that you have.
Yeah, I will look into that, but
Yeah, I know you
yep,
do.
that's yeah. Yeah, it's in one
So
of
it's
our guidelines, yeah.
So it's a matter of working with these tank removal operations too, to make sure that they're aware that they have, you know, that should be part of their process when they go in to remove a tank, that they've discussed that with the owner and what are we going to do? Should we come up with the contaminated soil? I know they did that in Jamestown because Leon was out there and he had them stockpile it. They stockpiled it until they found a place where they could actually dispose of the soil.
I just think it would be a good idea just to get the word out. The rules have changed a little bit, might be a new opportunity. Not that it works for everybody, but it's just another tool in the tool bag. Any more questions? Hearing none, I think we'll move on to overview of the proposed above ground storage tank administrative rules. Scott.
Okay.
Yes. Let
can
me
everybody
get out
hear?
here. Yep. Now space is yours, Scott.
Okay. What I'll do is I'll go over a few brief comments about this proposed rule. About a year ago, or maybe at the beginning of this year, David asked me to look into some technical standards for above ground storage tanks. And we have a team put together that's looking into that. And we have a draft so far, and Maggie Olson, the Assistant Attorney General for the department, has given us some preliminary comments on those, and we're kind of working through those. So these are just general comments on the rule, not real specifics, but I'll share this presentation now. Okay, is that showing up on everybody's screen?
Yes.
PowerPoint? Okay, good. Kind of the goal for these rules is number one, to reduce potential liability for the fund from above ground storage tanks, and also to reduce the potential for pollution or contamination to the environment from above ground storage tanks. And kind of the basis for the rules is that under the tank fund century code, the fund can't reimburse expenses or corrective action if the owner is not in compliance with state and federal rules. However, the only state rules for above ground storage tanks are in the fire code, and they really don't relate much to prevention of releases to the environment. They're basically more for safety purposes, not to prevent contamination. And the only federal rule for above ground storage tanks is from the EPA, and that's in the Spill Prevention, Containment, and Countermeasure Program. And that program only addresses releases to surface water, and it really doesn't cover soil or groundwater contamination. So these rules are essentially based on the underground storage tank rules, and we wanted to be as consistent as possible with the UST rules because, many tank owners or vendors and consultants are already real familiar with the underground storage tank rules, and so it would really reduce the learning curve for everybody. And so these rules kind of lay out the technical requirements under which an owner and operator has to operate, and therefore be eligible for reimbursement of an expense related to corrective action for a release. Now, these rules are only applicable to above ground storage tanks that are registered in the tank fund. They don't apply to any other tanks, only the tank fund. And existing above ground AST systems would have 10 years to replace or upgrade to the new tank standards. And that's the same time period that was allowed for underground storage tanks when those requirements came into effect about 30 years ago. And these rules do not replace or supersede any other health and safety requirements such as the fire code or the SPCC program. The major topics covered in above ground storage tank rules are again the same as in the underground storage tank rules, and so the main topics are new performance standards for new AST systems that are installed after the rule takes effect, notification requirements, secondary containment, spill and overfill control, corrosion protection, reporting and record keeping, release detection for tanks and piping, reporting and response to suspected releases, corrective action for releases, temporary and permanent closure, and closure records. Now, I'm not going to go into details on all of those things, Only two major ones that I'm going to really touch on today. And those are the performance standards for new above ground storage tank systems. All new AST system tanks must be secondarily contained in some manner, either a double walled tank, or they would have to be located in a lined secondary containment area. And all new AST tanks must have some form of corrosion prevention. They would either need to be raised so they're not in contact with an electrolyte or the ground, and that would also include being raised up on a gravel ring that would allow water to drain away from the tank, so there would not be an electrolyte present there. Or they would have to have cathodic protection in place, or constructed of a non-corrodable material, or clad or coated with a non-corrodable material. And underground piping must be double walled, just like underground storage tank piping. And above ground piping would not need to be double walled if it's not under continuous pressure. And the next major thing I'll talk about briefly is release detection. And all existing and new systems must have or perform some method of release detection. There's going to be a variety of acceptable methods, and it depends on whether the system is or is not secondarily contained, and also whether the system does or does not have double wall piping. But at the very minimum, existing AST systems can use inventory control if there's not some other method for continuous release detection. And we tried to provide as much flexibility as possible, but we do want every owner operator to, at the very minimum, do monthly inventory control. And those kind of are the main points for the above ground storage tank technical rules. I can take some questions, or if you have comments right now, or you can contact Dwayne or myself, sometime in the future. Once we get it to more of a final draft and we address comments from the attorneys, I'll give it to Dwayne and he can distribute the draft for people to review in detail. Any questions now?
Scott, Tony Bernhardt here. Could you go back to the slide where it said 10 years replace or upgrade for the ASTs?
Sure.
What does that exactly mean to a tank owner? I would imagine that they will be invoiced per se for the year of the tank as it exists, not that they have 10 years to upgrade or replace, correct? When it comes to the grading system of the tank as it exists, I want to be clear on that, because I don't want to have the understanding that an owner of a tank has 10 years to do something. As it is today, it should be billed according to what that container is today, I believe.
I think Dwayne can probably answer those questions a little better, and if I'm not completely correct, he can jump in here. But each year until that existing tank system meets the new standards, the calculation for his registration fee would be based on what the current setup is. Not, he doesn't get a 10-year grace period on that.
That would make sense. Thank you.
That's correct, Scott. That's correct.
Based on the risk of that tank.
That's correct. At the registration date. Yep.
Makes sense.
Scott, this is Matt. I
I can see here a conflict and a confusion by tank owners because many of the things that are proposed here are significantly different than what's in SPCC. And specifically when it comes to SPCC, almost everybody with smaller tanks is using the steel tank SP001 to for their engineer to comply with SPCC rules. And some of the examples I'd give, I mean, impermeable barriers underneath the tanks is a great idea. But in SPCC plan, if in lieu of that, there's options, there's flexibility for tank owners, and the incentive right now for putting a barrier in is that you don't have to do internal inspections on a periodic basis, depending on what type of tank or age of tank you have. And I guess the point is there's different things in this proposal that I don't agree with. One, saying that you want guys to have double wall tanks. I've been advising our farm customers that who don't want to build a dike because of the way it looks on their farm. I've been advising them that, you know, vertical horizontal tanks, in my estimation, are not a good idea because it's almost impossible to install an entrance manway on that tank. So nobody's ever going to get inside. And what we're finding in our tanks, the bulk of the corrosion goes on the inside, on the bottoms. So I think double bottom tanks are a great idea, but saying that everybody needs a double wall tank, I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. It is true SPCC isn't worried about groundwater contamination, but if you have an SP plan done by an engineer following SP001 and you actually are doing it, that plan will prevent leaks into the ground. And I think in the case of the tank fund, you know, our big $1 million leaks are from ASTs feeding retail, and I see that you have double wall requirement for the lines underground, but double wall by itself doesn't prevent the leak from going into the ground, and I think we have multiple UST sites that prove that out. Without proper leak detection on those lines, we have not solved what has been a huge problem to our fund in sites like at Mandan or a new one at Manville. I spoke with Dwayne yesterday. I mean, there's a site in Manville that's got a leak. Didn't have an SPCC plan, don't know what it is. They had a leak from underground lines. They put in new stuff, and lo and behold, I was there 4 days ago. The new stuff doesn't have leak detection on their lines. So there is no incentive right now from the federal or the state government for these guys with above ground tanks feeding retail to put in leak detection. And if we don't do that, we're not going to solve these $1 million claims. So I appreciate the effort. I recognize that we need something, but I've in the past suggested that for your regular old bulk plants, if the state was just going around and making sure that people were complying with SPCC, not only just having a plan, but actually using the plan and doing what the plan says on the time frames it says, we would solve the bulk of our discharges from regular old bulk plants. And what's proposed here is not going to solve what's been the #1 problem in my mind, claim-wise anyway, which is discharges from piping underground feeding retail. That's not to say I'm against the whole idea. I'd be glad to work with you on it, but there's a long ways to go.
Yeah, I agree with you as well. This does not include all the details for release detection requirements. And so, and I don't know that I can really go into it that much with you today, but this would include very similar requirements for underground piping as for underground storage tank systems, which again, it would be double walled. It would either have to drain to a containment sump by gravity, which could be visually checked, or visually checked and have a sensor in the containment sump, or it would have to have some continuous form of release detection on that piping itself. So, you know, those concerns are addressed, and when you do see the final details, if you know we're not addressing those concerns, boy, definitely be sure to work with us on that.
As to the issue of confusion by the tank owners, the regulated parties, I mean, they're going to be doing one set of things for SPCC and another set for the state rules. I mean, would the suggestion that the state rules more mirror the SPCC rules have any traction with you guys? Because as a regulated party, we're all, those of us that are trying to do it right and have plans already know what we need to do. And there'd be nothing wrong with the state having a rule that almost mirrors SPCC. And by the state having that rule, I see where then you would have the authority to enforce it. I think that's a good idea. But if the state rule is vastly different than SPCC and the industry standard that guides it, regulated parties are going to have a hard time figuring out exactly what they should do and might be doubling up on some things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we definitely don't want to be in conflict with SPCC. And if when you see the final draft on this, if you see any conflicts with SPCC, then you know we want to know about that.
This is
Can I ask
Matt.
does your department have a copy of the Steel Tank Institute SP001?
Yes, we do.
That group that came up with that, I mean, spent a couple years meeting, and there was regulators, tank owners, tank manufacturers in there. I would just highly encourage you to go back and look at some of the thought processes there. The goal was to stop leaks and to punish that, and not to punish, but to incentivize owners with the different options to get their sites up to snuff. And I think it's a great starting point. I would encourage maybe referencing it.
Okay, we'll take a closer look at that as well.
You know, the bulk of that committee's debate and work was in the matrices that define what you have to do based on tank size and risk and age. I think it would go a long ways to getting us to where we all want to be, including, you know, all of us.
Okay, appreciate the comments.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is Dave. You know, I appreciate the comments too, Matt. Is that, you know, we don't want to make things very more complicated than they are now, where we can go lockstep or parallel to SPCC. That makes sense. But we also need to be taking a look at what is, when we deal with above ground storage tank, are there areas where the SPCC does not adequately address, and we see that as a liability for the fund? We may want to keep an eye on that as well. So it might be SPC plus a few things added. I'm not saying that that's the case, but with the intent that, first of all, it's protection of the environment for us from the DEQ. That will reduce the liability to the fund and then also reduce the liability to the tank owner. And so I think we need to be open and minded enough as a group as we move forward is common sense regulations as we move forward. So I guess, without looking at the written word on the piece of page, it's kind of tough to really pinpoint stuff right now.
Right.
I see Ruben has his hand up. Do you have a comment, Ruben?
Yeah, thank you, Dwayne. I was just going to add on top of what Dave and Scott was talking about. When we were doing a research on these AST rules, one of the things that we were keeping in our mind too was the rule for the insurance registration itself. Because if you look at the multiplier, what I'm trying to talk about here is the issue of double wall. And if you look at the multiplier, the single wall AST fall under 5.0 under the new rule for registration. So we were trying to break that down a little bit, and that's where we come with that issue of double wall rather than a single wall. We were trying to mirror to that direction. So that's what I just want to add.
Matt, did you have something to add?
I was just wondering if with state UST rules, have you got the sign off that they wouldn't be in conflict with the North Dakota statute that we can't be more stringent than a federal rule? I mean, have you determined? I hope you have. I hope it's true that we in fact through AST rules can regulate leak detection on those above ground tanks feeding retail with underground lines.
Yeah, and we'll be taking a look at that. That's always first and foremost in our mind is not being more stringent. There is an opportunity that if we collectively feel that for the protection of the tank owner, the environment and the fund, that we need to be more stringent. If we think that's the direction to go, we would have to justify why that would happen. And we're not there yet.
Well, it's kind of an odd.
Go ahead.
It's an odd situation because it depends if you consider having a regulation the federal government doesn't have more stringent. I mean, I don't know how they define that in the North Dakota statute, but most of the time we think, well, okay, a state rule governing this can't be more stringent than the federal rule governing this. And in the case of these underground pipes from ASTs, there is no federal rule. So
right.
If
they're silent on it, yeah.
They're silent. Well, their hands are tied. We've talked to EPA oust, and there was that particular thing. There's a gap in the federal law that nobody has primacy. So I hope you guys can get a yes answer on that, because it would be nice to do it in a ST rule.
Right. And we'll take a look at that as we move forward to see what the best way to move forward.
I just have one comment on that. There are a number of areas in state environmental rules where there aren't any federal regulations, basically silent on it, and we did make state rules for that. One of those examples is T-norm regulations. There's no federal regulation of T-norm, which is technologically enhanced, naturally occurring radioactive material. That's the kind of the oil field radioactive filter socks, that sort of thing. And we wrote state rules because there's nothing in the federal rules covering that. So, and the Attorney General let that go through.
And that's a good point, Scott. That obviously we want common sense regulation that is not onerous and it doesn't make any sense. So as we move forward, we'll definitely take a look at this. And if the federal government is silent and we feel collectively as a group, the regulated community and the DEQ, that this is something we should look at, I think that's definitely something we would take a look at and possibly propose. Any other questions? Mike, Rude, do you have any questions?
No, I totally like the idea that we need to take a hard look at the whole primacy issue regarding the ASTs feeding the retail sites. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons that our association felt so strongly we should try to get this fund moved over to the DEQ, because we know long term, if we're going to protect that tank fund, we have to do something with these ASTs feeding retail, because there's a heck of a lot more of them out there than what you think. And without any type of leak detection on those sites, this is going to become a real concern to the solvency of the fund. So that's my concern. And I think you guys are talking in the right direction. So I feel pretty comfortable at this point that we can solve that issue. So thank you.
Thank you. Matt, Tony, I guess where I'm hearing is that definitely we're hearing you loud and clear. Make them common sense as closely as we can mirror image the SPCC, so we're not doubling up or giving conflicting directions for owners out there. We need to be doing that, and as we develop our rules, that would be our intent moving forward as a DEQ. So we'll keep that in mind as we get closer to the drafts. We'll get you copies so you can start looking at them and see how you respond to it, or how it looks to you. Does that sound like a plan?
Oh, that's a good plan, and I would just offer that those of us out here, Tony, myself, and others, if before you come out with the proposed rule, you want to engage us, we'd be more than happy to share our opinions.
And we'd be more than happy to receive it. So thanks. Anything else on that issue? Thanks, Scott. Appreciate your work on that area. We can move on to the next agenda item is discussion of the proposed PTRCF administrative rules. And Dwayne, do you want to?
Yep,
run through that?
I do.
While Dwayne's looking, could I ask Ruben a question?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Ruben, our president a few weeks ago tweeted out that E10 pumps are going to be magically declared compatible with E15. And of course, he said pumps, but we all assume he's been told the whole system, but maybe doesn't understand that. It's unfortunate because the regulated community's got lots of questions. Some people are thinking that this is a hall pass to do whatever you want. Are you getting any calls from marketers thinking that one tweet changes the federal law and fire code and OSHA?
No, Matt, I didn't get any phone call, and this is the first time I've been to hear about it, so I will just be on outlook for that.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, it's.
Matt,
Excuse me. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, this is Dave, that we've had some inquiries as it relates to E15 and kind of where that is going nationally and how our current state regulations and laws address that.
But you pretty much, I mean, when it comes to compatibility, the state, I assume, is going to have to, whatever EPA in the final end, I mean, your funding's at risk if you don't follow the federal, right?
Correct. We have to be at least as stringent as the federal.
Right.
But we have compatibility questions. That's always been out there. And as we get some clarity on that, I do think we're going to do some public outreach, education as it relates to that, so we don't get that feeling or that the industry feels it's a blank check and you do whatever you want. That's not the case. And so we need to be very clear on that.
Well, it's we're being told at this point, obviously, it's a high-level political decision. The rank and file, the worker bees at EPA oust are not returning phone calls to industry, and I don't really blame them, because what are they going to say? But EPA has put out extensive information on this, so for them to flip-flop, it's nobody in the real world thinks it's going to happen. But we don't want our tank owners thinking that, the one thing as regulated community we need is consistency and certainty. And the random tweets aren't providing any of that. And I'm afraid further announcements from the politicals at EPA are going to further confuse those of us with regulated tanks. So just curious what was being heard out in Bismarck, because it's of a concern to us as a tank fund.
Yeah, and this is Dave. Just in general, how we deal with a lot of this, there's several regulations that come across the board, not just in the petroleum industry, that can be extremely confusing, and seems like one day you're going one direction, the next day you're doing a 180-degree turn and going the other direction. And we, once it kind of the dust settles, I see us in this case getting the word out, working with petroleum marketers to kind of provide clarity to this, so people aren't left hanging. And so thanks for the heads up. We'll keep an eye out for it. It will be in communication.
Okay, well, I've got the Article 33.1-12 up on the screen. I know our bulk of our conversation is going to deal with the registration fee. That would be section 12-01-03. So what I'd like to do to get the other sections out of the way, just to see if you have any comments about the definitions. The language has been cleaned up considerably. The tank registration in O2 hasn't changed a whole lot. We will continue to send mail notices for the new registration years. We've just found that talking with this last registration year, talking with our clientele that receives notices, that a mailed notice is much more noticeable than an email, because sometimes the emails get lost in their in baskets because they're so full. So I would say at least 75% of the people I've talked to have said continue to mail out, that initial notice that we send out in June. So we've incorporated that into the rules, that we'll continue to do that. We will also send it out to electronically. One thing that I want to point out that the portal has really done is the information we had in our database was quite antiquated. Sometimes people weren't there. Sometimes the contact information, those people didn't exist anymore. They were deceased. Addresses were incorrect. Mailing addresses were incorrect. So by making the portal functional, where people can go in and actually change all of that information online, I can state that for about 80%, anybody that used the portal, the information we have in the database now is current and up to date and has correct information. So that'll, going forward, that's going to really, really ease the labor burden that we've had with past registrations. So I want to skip over 3 because we'll come back and discuss those because that's where most of the discussion is going to center, I'm sure. Notification of release procedures, we've just went through the old 45-10 rules and have really tried to define our process a little better, I think, so that it's well defined. The procedures for investigation claims, that hasn't changed a great deal, but I think we're going to do a better job of actually taking a look at claims. It might take a little longer to resolve the claim payment, but we want to take the time to examine those claims, make sure all the invoices are correct, make sure that the things that the fund is being charged for, in fact, did happen, and that they're reasonable and necessary, and even to the point of going back to either the contractor or the owner and asking questions about those invoices. That was the case of the red carpet claim. The red carpet claim took almost 2.5 months to move forward because there were several questions I had of that owner and his contractors, and we resolved those and then moved it forward. Reimbursement has not changed a whole lot. One of the things that the Attorney General's office wanted us to do, if you look in the definitions, we had to define testing because it wasn't really defined anyplace, so they wanted a decent definition of what, if we're going to pay for testing, what does that mean? So we placed a definition in under testing. Let's see, we talk about ineligible expenses. It's changed a little bit, but not a great amount. Just basically defining some of those non-costs that for instance, consultant markup costs. So if a consultant buys a product and wants to mark it up, we're not going to pay for those markup costs. We just define that a little better. 5 changed a little bit. So determine what expenses are reasonable and necessary. The owner or operator must bid the excavation and consultant work. The owner or operator is required to obtain a minimum of 3 bids. The bids that meet the cost effectiveness, technical, and environmental requirements of the department will be deemed by the petroleum tank program to be the reasonable cost for that project. The bid must be submitted according to the fund's excavation and consultant worksheets. Additional work over and above the original bid will be reissued reimbursed according to the unit costs on the original bid. So we cleaned that language up a little bit. Tony and Matt, did you guys have a chance to, I think I sent that document out to you, so you had a chance to take a look through it a little bit?
I did.
Go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, I did. I looked at it. It looks pretty good. The rating of the tanks is what I want to get into yet too as well.
Sure. Yep. That's why I left that to last, because I know I wanted to get all of this other nomenclature basically out of the way, just to make sure that you're seeing in the written part of the rules what you'd like to see. We redid third-party damages. According to the Attorney General's office, the old rules had the wrong reference. So workforce safety insurance is defined by Title 65 governing workforce safety insurance or agents of the owner or operator. So that was that was a significant change.
Hey, Dwayne,
Yep.
page 4, item 5, page 5, item 6. I wonder if we should
Page
consider
5.
page
Just let
4
me
and
get to-
page,
oh,
both places we talk about that that everything, it says are in compliance with state and federal regulations for the petroleum products stored and dispensed.
Okay.
I think we need to use a different term there with the advance of biofuels.
I think referring to, I can't remember the regulation that refers to the definition of petroleum tank. We have defined what a petroleum product is in that rule. And I believe it includes biofuels, but we can check on that. So we're talking about, I can talk to Maggie about that too. I think Maggie was on the line. Our representative at the General's office.
Yeah, I'm on the line. I'm not sure, but we can check on that.
Okay. So that is 33.1, number 6, right?
Number 5
on
and number 6.
Okay, 5 and 6.
Because, technically, E85 is not a petroleum product.
Yeah, we'll have to check and see what the definition is in the other rule that defines what a petroleum product is. If not, we'll have to, I suppose we'll have to, I don't know, we would probably have to include then.
Well, take a look at it.
Dwayne,
Maggie did add some comments.
Dwayne, this is Maggie. Petroleum is defined in the statute, so I just put that up in the chat, that definition for you guys.
Okay. Okay, so if you go to, let's see, where would that be? Okay, so if you just click on the little icon that's got like a, words in a little balloon, like in the comic books, you can see Maggie's comment there. So maybe we do have to add E85 to that.
Well, I think you might want to pick a term, and I don't know what the exact proper term is, but it's not just
Ethanol
E85.
blended too.
Well, and you got biofuels too. You got biodiesel. There are compatibility issues with biodiesel over 20%. So I don't know what the correct term is, but you want something that encompasses everything from 100% petroleum to 100% ethanol. As well as 100% diesel fuel to whatever blend of biodiesel there's in there.
Okay, yeah, we can work on that. Maggie will help us work through that. Thank you, Maggie, for your input. Okay, anything else before we move on to the
Money.
to the fee structure? Oh, wrong one. Okay, well, with not hearing anything, let's go ahead and move on to, we'll start right at the top. See anything in 1, 2, or 3 that you have questions on?
Do you want to, at this point, do you want to get into nitty-gritty comments, or do you want us to do that later?
Depends upon how long we want to be here.
Depends on how nitty gritty they are.
Yeah, it depends upon how nitty gritty they are, I guess.
I'll throw them out there.
Okay,
We'll
table
start.
one.
Okay.
I don't agree with not differentiate. I mean, post 2009, everything's got to be double wall. Pre 2009, and you have to use interstitial monitoring as your form of leak detection. Pre 2009, there's no differentiation between single or double wall systems, which, in my mind, huge difference in risk. And when it comes to the AST versus I guess in the multipliers, I think we need to do some work, because an AST not feeding retail does not have more risk than a pre-2009 UST double wall system. So I just think we need some tweaking on those multipliers.
So you're saying an AST that's non-retail poses no more risk than a pre-2009 UST? Is that what I'm hearing you say, Matt?
I'd say it poses less.
It poses less.
An AST with an impermeable barrier is, let's say it has a leak, it's going to be a mess in the dike, but that's the owner's problem. It's not ours.
Right.
It sure didn't go into the groundwater. And and when it comes to double walled, I think the inclusion of a with ASTs, the bulk of your leaks are on the bottom. So double walled versus double bottomed, I think there's room for some discussion there.
Same thing that we talked about in the AST rules.
Yeah,
right.
And exactly, because in the in the SPCC they talk about double bottoms or impermeable barriers. And I understand your point from yesterday, Dwayne, that you can get such big matrices with so many options that it's hard to figure out, but I think we need a couple more there. Did you say table 2 and table 3 too? You want comments?
Oh, sure. I just got, I just have one more question on the pre-2009 tanks.
Yep.
So you're saying that a single-walled pre-2009 tank as opposed to a double-walled 2009 underground tank poses more risk, is that right?
Absolutely.
Okay. So in other words, a pre-2009 single-walled underground storage tank should have a larger multiplier. Is that right?
I would say so, yeah.
Okay. All right. So you want to move to what, table 2 you said?
Yeah, I don't quite understand the approach here. The table 2, for some reason, please don't take these comments as criticisms. I'm just trying to be blunt so we get to the point. It focuses on a real small subset of tanks, or not a real small, but definitely a subset of tanks. Corrosion and the terminology there is not consistent. There are corrosion tests, and that are required. I'm not aware of any corrosion inspections unless of course you do have a line tank. But a single wall line tank is that was kind of junk technology from 1988. I mean, the EPA doesn't even allow you to do it anymore. So I think that whole table needs to be reworded and needs to address, I mean, having those multipliers for the people who have steel tanks that are jacketed, which don't require corrosion testing, or having this multiplier out there and all the fiberglass tanks are ignored. I just think that I don't understand the thinking at table 2, because corrosion inspections and internally lined tanks is just a subset of tanks. It's a very specific subset.
What did you call you called the fiberglass tank, or what other kind of a tank?
Internally lined.
There's many steel tanks out there that are clad. So they're clad with fiberglass, and there are no corrosion. Tests or inspections required by any rules on those, because most of them are a jacket tank. So you verify the integrity of both the primary and the secondary tank by the interstice. So I just, we'll never get it ironed out on this call, but table 2 is needs to be reworked.
Do you have some suggestions on how to rework it? Don't need that now. Just that might be helpful.
I do. I would go back to my comments from before and I can revamp them and send them to you guys if you'd like me to do so.
Yeah, if you could, I've got your original comments, but if you want to revamp those comments, you said you could revamp them a little bit.
I'll send them to you. You can take them for what they're worth.
Okay. Appreciate it.
And I guess the last line, this is more of a comment about multipliers in general. I mean, this is an example, but I don't think we should have a multiplier for anything that's required. So if you have a tank that's supposed to be corrosion tested, and it hasn't been, it doesn't need to be on the matrix because it's not in compliance.
This is Dave. Yeah, I agree with that. Is that if you're not in compliance, you're not part of the fund. But those tanks that were given a 10-year grace period to come into compliance, would we need something for those?
Are you talking AST, Dave?
Yeah. Because they wouldn't be in compliance necessarily, but the risk would be higher. So how would we address that? I don't have an answer to it. And it may be a nonsensical question. But.
No, it's a good question. I was thinking strictly USTs, but
yeah,
you have a point
there.
UST, this might be a question for Ruben, but if a UST tank isn't in compliance, you wouldn't issue a certificate of compliance for that particular site, correct?
Yes.
Okay, then they wouldn't be in compliance.
Right, which would mean that the claim would be probably denied.
So do you need that table 2 at all?
Well, I think you do, but you need different things in there.
Okay.
To the point of the certificate of compliance, that's another example where there's, in table 4, there's a multiplier for something that, isn't relevant because
Required.
it's required. I mean, the same is also, also shows up in 4B. If you don't have category, I mean, category 2 is required by federal law through SPCC. So, I mean, you might want to incentivize people to comply with SPCC in here, but I wonder if you need it if we're going to be able to get a, you know, a set of AST rules that the state has primacy over enforcement. You know, our biggest problem with above ground storage tanks and SPCC is that enforcement has been, it consists of a couple guys coming from Denver here every 10 years and hitting a few people. And other than that, there is no enforcement.
I agree. This is Dave. Makes a good point. Is that if it's something that you have to comply with anyway, why even have a category for it? You just flat out have to comply. Because if you don't, then you shouldn't be part of the fund, and then you shouldn't encourage.
You shouldn't. Yeah. Then you're gonna have people saying, "Well, I paid extra."
Yeah, and you accounted for it. Yeah, let's take a look at that. That makes some sense to me.
And again, I'm not, you know, I don't want to come off the wrong way because I know a lot of work's gone into this, but you just kind of have to be blunt if we're going to get to the, if we're going to get things.
Coming off.
Yeah. Well, I don't want it to.
Yeah, it doesn't come off the wrong way. Be honest with you, I'd much rather have these discussions now than while we're going through public comment period. So it's helpful.
Dwayne, if you're done with table 4, I'd like to go back to table 3 just as a question.
Okay.
So in table 3, you've got different volumes of gallons there, and according to the multiplier, are the tank owners rewarded for a larger tank, or what does that do for the owners of the tanks? How does that work? Plus, are they AST tanks, underground, or both?
Both. That volume of the tank, the gross volume of the tank is intended for both types of tanks.
So is it are we rewarding in the future to put smaller tanks in because the multiplier is less, or are we telling people to put bigger tanks in because the multiplier helps them?
Well, it's you know, I guess if you have, yeah, maybe we don't even need the volume of the tank. Maybe we don't need that table.
And I agree with Matt, and that's why I bring it up, because if we follow the rules, really in my mind, it should take care of itself if I'm thinking correctly here. Because if you have proper containment above and if it's double wall below, well then your testing and your sensors should be correct. It should be all fine.
So it shouldn't make any difference.
I just can't see why it would make a difference.
Okay.
Well, the just playing devil's advocate here, Tony. In the case of Patriot Fuels, where they had a brand new tank totally split open underground, there it does make a difference, because if it was either they could lose 10,000 gallons or they could lose 40.
Okay, and I get that, Matt, but does that not go back to the manufacturer then?
Well, I think the courts are going to figure that out.
You know, I think it's really specific to what the situation might be, but I'm just trying to help understand table 3, whether it warrants installing bigger tanks or smaller tanks. Because what you're going to do if it rewards smaller tanks, you're just going to put more of them in, and you're going to say it have the same volume at the end of the day.
It could be that if we want to try our best to keep this as keep what's a complicated thing as simple as possible, that we use those chips, if you would call them that are in table 3, to further add different multipliers where it really does make a big difference.
I guess at the end of the day, when we make these changes, I'd really like to play with it because we have multiple years of tanks, new and old alike, above ground and below ground. It'd be nice once we get this table figured out to just run it through the gamut once and see what makes a difference so we can kind of test it, guys.
We agree. This is Dave, kind of way I look at it though, is that, so we wanted to assess risk somehow, and how do we go about doing that? And from this conversation, what I'm hearing that is your base minimum requirements to comply, you don't get any credit for that. You just have to comply with that first and foremost to be part of the fund. That's a given. So you don't get any credit for that. You just have to do that. Now, so when we go beyond that, it's looking at age, volume, whatever to assess risk. But I also think we should find a way to incentivize if you want to go beyond the bare minimum by reducing your risk, whatever it is. More frequent, monitoring. I don't know, but do have something in there that if you want to go beyond the minimum, you should get some credit for that somehow.
And Dave, I think you're onto something there because, in above ground tanks, some owners have not only a clay liner diked properly, but they also have double walled tanks. So prime example, they should be rewarded for doing more possibly.
Right.
Well,
you're right. Go ahead.
You're right, Dave. It's there's not only the reward or you could call a multiplier a punishment, but there's also the key is to incentivize people to go beyond. If we could get everybody in this state to put enhanced line leak detection on their underground lines and do frequent statistical leak detection on their tanks, we would see our claims fall to being a bunch of people who are non-compliers. The only people with the only significant leaks would people who are blatant law breakers. And we could do that in here. We could incentivize people to go above and beyond. And in the end, we help them help themselves just as much as we help the fund.
So you're providing more of a carrot than a stick.
Nothing wrong with a little. Basically. Yeah. Nothing wrong with a little of both, but.
Sure.
We can all do better. Do better.
If we do more incentivize, if we look at 3, we've right now, if the fund drops less than $6 million, our fee is $100, where this decreases to, let's see, well, maybe it does. It increases to $100, so it's the same. The base fee would still be $100. If the fee goes up to $7 million, let's see, the fund balance is $7 million, and it drops to $75 per tank. So that wouldn't change anything. It wouldn't.
So philosophically, is that
we may look at. I mean, if we go with $100 as our base tank fee, and then we incentivize something, that means we're going to charge less than $100 per tank, which could decreases our revenue.
But if your risk is decreased based on improved design and improved monitoring, then it probably should pay less.
Yeah, but that doesn't help us out for claims that we have $800,000 worth of reserves already reserved for it.
Yeah, this is true. But
And keeping in,
that's a problem you run into trying to define risk.
yeah, and keeping in mind that the statutory limit is $6 million. We're supposed to have $6 million in that fund.
Yeah.
We don't. So I think basically, I still think basically we have to generate more revenue than $620,000 a year somehow. How we come to that is, I mean, we can do it several different ways, but.
Well, if you guys have some suggestions on this, we're all ears. You know, I think you could go one thing, you just charge a higher base fee.
Yeah, we could do that. That would be very simply changed.
Yeah, higher base fee. And
Yeah.
then, but
That would be easy
you could
because,
add something in there, some incentive that you would reduce that higher base fee if we're going beyond the minimum.
right, that's where the matrix would come in,
Yeah.
you know, but we could probably streamline this matrix too. So guys, if you have some suggestions, you know, you can print this off and mark it up and send it to me. Send it to me electronically, scan it and send it to me. So I can take a look at, you know, that would help immensely.
I hear some heavy duty calculation going on.
That was me, Tony. If we had a base, and I'm not suggesting this, but if we ran it through the simulator here again, if we charged a minimum of $125 a tank, that would give you another right around 125,000 a year for tank registration. Then if we're thinking about rewarding the good behavior and going above, then maybe it can drop down to $100 a tank or something like that for compliance, you know, for the over and abovers, for the achievers. Something to think about.
Plus.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Just for, you know, for large tank operators, $25 a tank is a pretty good, you know, I mean.
Okay, a lot of tanks.
Yeah, we're running into that with the late fees, you know, all of a sudden somebody doesn't pay and all of a sudden they got 50 tanks and their late fees are they're half of what their registration fees were, which is good for the fund, by the way, if we collect it, which we do.
And
But-
you know,
but,
we go ahead.
On the other hand, $25, Tony, do you think that's a significant enough incentive for people to put the right things in place? Because that's what we'd be looking at, is about a 25% reduction in their premium.
Well, my point is, if I have an older tank and I have to pay $300 just because it's an old tank, but we have it lined, everything's in compliance, we're doing the leak tests like we are, we're looking at the SPCC monthly on the ASTs, instead of us paying $300 a tank because it's just an old tank and we meet all the compliances, I'd rather pay $125 a tank than $300, and that's where I'm going with it.
Well, yeah, that makes perfect sense. I mean, as from a business standpoint, that certainly makes sense. Yeah.
This is Dave. I like the concept of a base fee, and instead of the stick is that if you want to go beyond, we'll give you credit for that because it reduced, but not getting too low. You know, you still got to pay for the.
And quite honestly, if we did that, that would make this matrix a lot more simple. And when it comes time to Gary having to put together, you know, the matrix for the portal, it would be a lot less headache from a.
But you would also, those that would come in with a compliance plus, you'd have to figure out some way to document that they actually have that plus.
Yeah. Any comments on that, either Matt or Tony? How would we, without physically having to go out to the location, how would we do that with, you know, over 1,875 different tank owners?
I don't think you can do that on the get-go. I think that's a progress that you have to get to, because I really think that all of these above ground tank bulk plants have to be inspected, number one, first, to promote a program like that, because you got to know what you have first out in the country, right?
Correct. So we would have to have maybe some kind of an application fee of some kind for an incentive to reduce your tank fees?
Well, are you talking just above ground or below ground too?
Well, I think if we're talking tanks in general, I mean, we insure both, so.
But-
Underground would certainly be a lot easier because they're federally regulated.
Well, they'd be
You know.
easier because Ruben's department already gets a report of how we're doing it. I mean,
Right.
if we're
Yeah.
doing enhanced line leak detection and sending them copies of continuous statistical leak detection on our tanks, they know it. So you can verify it with them and call over there. Does this site go above and beyond 3 gallon per hour leak detection? And they'd say, yeah, they do.
Sure.
And
Ruben, do you agree? You can supply that to us, correct?
Yep, and not only that, on USTs we do inspection too. So yeah, those documentation are available, and that's the main objective of COC that we send out annually, is to meet that criteria.
And I think you're right.
That's when you issue a certificate of compliance then, Ruben?
What that?
Would that have anything to do with a certificate of compliance?
Oh yeah, that's what the certificate of compliance is about.
You really have you really could do a plus program on the UST, but the ASTs, it's going to take some work yet.
Correct.
Right. I like that philosophy, though.
Yeah, I think that's really good.
Well, I guess if you guys want to provide some comments, Matt and Tony, just kind of, I mean, we'll kind of rework this and see what we come up with.
Do you have any comments about Table 5? Table 5 talks about claims.
You know, I think it's the wrong idea. The right idea may be the wrong application. And I'm thinking of a specific site in the state where we spent $1 million, and I've used this for an example before. And it wasn't so much that they had a claim, it was that they continued to use the same equipment that caused the leak. You know, when you have a site with $1 million claim, they replaced the portion of pipe that leaked. The rest of the pipe, including the other grades, are the same, and there's no multiplier for him. There's no incentive for him to upgrade. In fact, there's a disincentive because the way the federal rules are written, he'll have to put in all new double wall systems that use interstitial monitoring for his primary leak detection, and he will have to pay to have all that tested every 3 years. Right now, all he has to do is every year he has to pay someone to come do a primary line test and check his leak detector's functionality. So the difference in cost for just his compliance, he's way better off keep using the old crap that caused the leak, and there is no incentive, state or federally, for him to upgrade. And that's, I think Table 5 is the right idea, but we're not going to catch those kind of guys. If, you know, his claim we just wrapped up pumping water there not too long ago, so he'll be back to paying the same as the guy running with a good site.
So do you have any suggestions on what we need to do with Table 5?
Oh, I thought you were going to say with a site like that, it would be kick him out if it was up to me.
Yeah, well, it would be nice to kick them out, but state law says they got to be registered.
Yeah, I know that. I'm being a little facetious, but
Sure.
On the other hand, if he had to go buy private insurance, that site would be closed. Nobody will insure. We're the only people. Nobody would take them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
are the multipliers too low then, or what?
I would say I would have suggestions for Table 5, but I think it would just wait. We don't have to get into the nitty-gritty.
Okay. Well, if you would just, I know you made some comments, the last comment period about, you know, that one example you talked about. So, and these are toned down considerably from that, as far as the multipliers go. So just send me some information. Take a look at those tables and cross out and do some work to it so that, you know, anything that you guys give me would be great help.
Okay. And the easiest thing to do is just charge $1,000 a tank. See the reaction there.
Then we would have more people on the do not pay list.
Yeah, probably.
Hey,
I'm being facetious. I don't advocate that. So.
Dwayne Ruben here.
Yeah.
Another thing, another scenario that we should keep in mind too when we're dealing with table 5 is petrol fuels. Petrol fuels, in such a situation too, where are they going to fall in here? Because it might be a manufacturer fault. Should they be penalized on top of what they did and wasn't their fault and all that? So those are the things that we should consider on table 5 too.
Well, that's a good point. It's only a 2-year look back period, so it's not. I mean, if I have an accident with my car and I go out and have it fixed and have it brought up to standards, what's going to happen to my car insurance? I guarantee you it's not going to go down. So, I mean, that's kind of what it's based on. It's my experience with the insurance industry.
High risk.
Yeah.
If you have somebody that has multiple releases over a period of time, then we got multiple claims.
And after 2 years, after the claim has been closed, after 2 years, it goes away. They're back to where they were.
Sure.
So it's not, you know, it's not penalizing them for a lot of time, but we're trying to recover some of our costs.
And guys, this would be site specific. It doesn't affect all of the tank owners' tanks. It's site specific, correct?
It is site specific, yes. Because we had, Maggie and I and Jim Nicolai had large discussions about the fact that it needed to be site specific. So it says registered tank location. So it's site specific. So in other words, Tony, if you had a spill on one of your locations, you wouldn't get penalized for every location that you have, just that particular site. Yeah.
Well, and I can give you an example that, you know, when there's an inheritance of a site and they have an existing claim, do you then get penalized for that, or how do you rate that, or how do you multiply that when it comes in? It's already been a spill, it's been addressed, but there's a new owner per se.
I would think that I would think that wouldn't then apply. It would only apply to because you're not, well, you may inherit the fact that you're getting reimbursement if you're still working on the site.
Correct.
But, you didn't cause the claim, so it shouldn't be be penalized for buying that site.
I mean, another option, and I don't know if it's going to be popular, but I mean, for somebody that has a significant $1 million claim and keeps using that equipment, is it feasible for us to say, if you continue operating it the same way, we're not going to insure it. You're excluded from the requirement. You need to buy private insurance. At which point they will go look for private insurance, and they will either upgrade or they will close.
Right. I'm not sure we would have that power under the Century Code, though, because the Century Code,
as long as they comply. But if the upgrade gets them into compliance, then they should be there. But if they don't upgrade and they're not in compliance,
so
they're not part of the fund.
So we could deny insurance in those?
Based on non-compliance. Now, but if they're in compliance and they're using old equipment that's still in compliance, I don't think we'd have the right to
Well, and with no above ground storage tank rule, so that means they would have to be in compliance with SPCC standards then?
My issue with any rules like this is that there's always the exception.
Yeah.
So there should be a process by which, you get 95% of the facilities out there are covered. There should be a process where the board can address the 5% to make a determination based on the fact.
Well, I think we have an appeals process too, don't we? I'm not sure if it's in the rules or the Century Code, but there is an appeals process right there under reimbursement disputes.
My opinion is we want to make it as clear as possible so we don't have to resort to that.
Right.
Always.
So that's something that we should probably address in the rules then, because I don't think it's really addressed in the Century Code.
Well, let's take another pass at this. If you guys, Matt and Tony, if you could provide your thoughts and even some tables if you think that clarifies it, we'll see what we can do to move forward.
Just for everybody's information, this is just a tentative timeline. I would really like to get the public hearing done by January 7th and close the public comment period January 19th. But based on what we're hearing, I'm not sure that's.
Push it out a little bit more.
Yep. I'm not sure that's a realistic time frame.
Want to do it right.
The key is, we have a time frame if we want to get this implemented in July of 2001.
Don't want to do it right.
But if we don't meet that timeline, we could go into basically our rates wouldn't change it until 2022 if we really write the rules and get it right. And I agree, we don't want to have to ever reopen these things.
And we'll have to explain it probably to the legislative council, where we're at on this process and why we weren't able to get it done this biennium, or if that's what in fact happens.
Right.
But we, because I think the intent is that we'd have a risk-based system in place this biennium.
Right.
And if we're unable to do that, we'll have to provide some explanation.
Okay.
So if we can kick it into gear and see what we can come up with.
Would that go to the legislative council, or would we have to reply directly to the legislature?
That'd be legislative council. They'll be asking for us to.
Okay.
And the legislature may ask too.
Okay. All right.
But I think, to simplify it, and the philosophy is have a fee, and then you can reduce that fee with some positive actions, compliance plus. I think, generally speaking, that might be the way to go. Maybe
Okay.
we take baby steps on this and rather than trying to solve all the world's problems at one time.
Right. I agree.
Anything more, Matt and Tony?
Just a lasting comment for Dwayne, if you're going to switch some multipliers or take some out or incorporate some new multipliers, can you send out the new spreadsheet so us board members can play around with it?
Sure.
Definitely.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, you guys had asked about who's hasn't paid late. You want to see them? Here they are.
We can provide you that.
Yep, and I can send this out in an email to you. Some of them have paid that are on here. I'll make sure I go through and mark the ones that have. Most have been contacted, well, they've all been contacted at least 3 times by mail. And the ones that the mail bounced back to us, they've been addressed, so. Okay, that's all I have, gentlemen. Anything else?
So Dwayne, if you've went through that process already and you sent them out reminders, at what point don't they comply with the fund? Because that's why I wanted to look at it. I mean, I'm not saying we need to do your job for you. If you've done all that, at what point do we just say, guys, you're no longer, you're no longer approved for the fund until it gets taken care of?
Yeah, I can send this letter out to you. This was a letter that went out with the late fees in October, on October 9th. But it just basically states that the registered site will have no insurance coverage until the invoices are paid for the site in full. And we have certification that the tanks that they have are there. And then also it references the underground storage tank program, that anybody with underground storage tank programs, they're not maintaining their evidence of financial responsibility. So that's what went out with that letter. So it's not like they haven't been notified and they know. I mean, if they read the letter, they know that they're not insured. I mean, if a claim comes in, they're not covered. They're not going to get coverage.
Could we throw another bone to this though, because it really doesn't specify the ending date of not being covered? They realize they're not covered if there's a claim, but if they pay, then they're covered again, number one. Number two, could we kind of find out or maybe give more information as far as who the owner's insurance company is? Because I'll guarantee you, if you were to send a letter to the owner and the insurance provider of that owner, they would be making a pretty good phone call real quick.
Yeah, don't know what our legal ability is to do that. We'll look into it.
Okay.
Dwayne, in the past, we've been told that part of the problem with some of these people not paying is that it's up to the local state's attorney to begin legal proceedings against them.
Yes, we would have to file I think we'd have to file like a motion to collect to the local state's attorney's office.
Jeff always claimed that many of them refused.
Well, that could be. I've not had any experience. We were able to collect everything last year, so you didn't have to go that route.
I'd say that's probably true, but, you know, from a bigger picture on some of our environmental issues where we've had some violations of the environmental code, when you talk to some of the state's attorneys, when they got, you know, drug dealers and murders and all that kind of stuff, this kind of really comes low on their list, and they just don't have the time.
Would there be an advantage to switching that to where it's the Attorney General that sends them?
Yeah, that's a whole different conversation, which I'm sure they might not necessarily like to do that too much. But, you know, I think the biggest penalty is, say, you're not part of the fund anymore. And if you're not paying into it, you can't get any benefits here. And I think that's probably our biggest
We've got them down to a small number, so if we have a legitimate phone number and I get a chance to talk to the owner, I've been pretty persuasive about getting tank fees paid.
Maybe let's try down that path for a while.
Yeah, I think that's the way to go. And we continue to add late fees. I mean, you know, it could come December, they could be owing double tank fees, because it'll be 4 months worth of late fees. So, yeah, give me a crack at it. I'm a pretty darn good collector. I got Vito and Vinny working in the field once in a while. Just kidding.
Yes, please.
Just kidding.
Anything else? I have a few things for other business, but anything else or other topics of discussion? This is Dave, you know, real quick here. Just to point out, you know, we still work with the fire marshal's office. They do review of some of the plans and specifications to make sure they're up to code, and then we get charged for that. You know, typically it's a couple $100 a month, even if that, it's not that much. And so, but we do still interact with them. We had in the last, when we took over the program, we had the opportunity to hire 2 people. We have not hired the second position yet. It's still there, but we're not going to take action on that until we kind of see where the rules go. You know, like obviously, if we get above ground storage tank rules, I see that as creating a whole another level of, at least initially, a lot of work, and we may look at that position at that point, but we have not hired it now. Dwayne's taking care of everything to this point, and I will stay with that philosophy. If we do get to a point where we want to fill that position, we'll circle back to the board and kind of give our justification why we want to move forward at that point in time. I would like to see, you know, looking long-term, I do see a potential for a position like that to go out and do inspections or be an ombudsman to kind of compliance assistance with people to, you know, we still want them in the fund, but we want them in there as good partners. And so could this position basically spend time out in the field talking to folks, working with them in a, not a threatening regulatory stance, but in a compliance assistance. And that might be something of more benefit moving forward. And so that's just a thought there. As we move forward to the legislative session, we are looking at a few things that tangentially may affect here. One of the things we're looking at is you know, liability, being clearer on the liability relief as we move forward. We do have some of that now language for landowners or prospective buyers of facilities, and so we're looking at clarifying that. There may be a portion of that that might include a mini super fund that those facilities that are not covered by, say, the petroleum tank fund or those type of things, but they create an environmental hazard that there's something has to be done. Can we have a fund that would go in there and do cleanup, but then they would be going for cost recovery? It's not giving people a free pass, but if they're recalcitrant, in some cases there is no landowner, a viable landowner, something has to be done, and we might be looking at a fund like that. In addition, we're also looking at a uniform covenant law that in some cases where you only can clean up a site so far, you clean it up to where it's not an environmental risk or a public health risk, but there's still contamination there. We may put on institutional controls, says you can't dig a well, you can't put in a basement, you can't put a daycare facility. That would be a covenant that would go along with the property. So that whoever would buy that property, they would have to comply with that covenant moving forward. So we're looking at that kind of structure moving forward. And I can't think of anything else. You know, Maggie, I know you've been involved with some of this, if you have anything to add to that, but that's just in a big general sense, some of the things that we're looking at doing. Anything else for the good of the order? I guess maybe first I'll go with Tony and Matt.
Very good meeting, guys.
Okay. Dwayne, you had something?
No, I really don't. Thanks for everybody for meeting.
Well, and
Maggie, did you have anything to comment on? I see you raised your hand. No? Okay.
And we just have a few people on the line, and I will open it up to them we only got a couple minutes. If there are any comments from folks that were listening in or questions. Okay, hearing none. I appreciate this meeting, guys. Definitely is input. We're still learning as an agency moving forward. Hopefully we're moving the ball in a positive direction. I think we are, but if we aren't, as always, let us know.
I'd like to thank you, Mr. Glatt, and everyone, Dwayne. I think things have never been so bright for our fund, and you're doing a good job. So thank you.
You're welcome, and I do appreciate your bluntness. It's not taken as being blunt. That's just taken as this is the way it is, and so that's the way it's got to be. And so I appreciate that, and we look forward to our next meeting moving forward.
Okay.
So motion to adjourn the meeting.
This is Tony, so moved.
Second.
So obviously, I could say all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Bye.
Means we got a motion and a second, and that's everybody, I guess. So, well, you guys stay healthy, take care, and we'll be in touch. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.